Hello, this is Guan Rui Invest. Today I'll be talking about how I pick my stocks. So when it comes to stock selection, there are mainly two things that I focus on. So number one, it will be the growth of the company. And number two, it will be the predictability of the company. So when I talk about the predictability of the company, it means the company's ability to survive a recession, to survive some form of economic slowdown, and to prevent its market share from being taken over. So like take for example, let's say Visa and MasterCard. So they both hold about 40% of the market share, and they have been basically in a duopoly for the past 10 years. And so if you think about the predictability of Visa and MasterCard, it is extremely predictable because for Visa and MasterCard, their only competitor is cash. So cash is a competition that is non-competing, and so Visa and MasterCard will just continually take market share from cash. And that is why Visa and MasterCard are one of the highest quality businesses out there. It is one of the most predictable ones, and the only headwind for them is regulation. So the next portion that I'll be focusing on is growth. So when I talk about growth, what I want from my companies is organic growth, meaning to say I don't want growth from acquisitions or buybacks. Sorry, not acquisitions or buybacks. I don't want growth from mergers and acquisitions. I only want growth from buybacks or revenue growth or margin expansion. So for example, let's say you have a healthcare company like Elevance Health. So Elevance Health, the main way that they grow is through a few things. They have their care loan service, they have their insurance healthcare, and the other portion that they use to grow is to buy many different companies and do multiple different mergers and acquisitions. So I don't think it's a very high quality level of growth, meaning to say if one day the company just stops buying other companies, then the growth will slow, and that is not what I want from my companies. Instead, I want companies that have a secular growth trend. So again, take for example Visa and MasterCard. It grows with the economy. The economy grows, Visa and MasterCard, they will grow because they're basically like a royalty business. They take a small fee from each purchase that is being made on their cards. So when I talk about growth, I want companies with not super high growth, meaning to say I don't want the growth to be 50-60%. Of course, having 50%, 60% growth is great, but most commonly for those companies, they don't have very high predictability. So what I want for my companies is I want maybe a mid-teens to about low 20s growth, and that's usually what I aim for. So if you take for example, let's say you have Coke, you have Pepsi. So all those companies, right, they are extremely predictable, meaning to say I know what exactly they will make next year. I'll know what they will make the following year, provided there are no major changes in the structure of the company. So those companies, they're extremely predictable, but what they lack is they lack growth. So I want companies with both growth as well as predictability. So again, Visa and MasterCard growing 13-15% a year. You have ASML growing 20% a year. You have your Google growing 15% a year. You have your Meta growing at 15% a year as well. So those companies are extremely predictable, and those companies are usually the ones that I aim for. So next metric that I always look at when it comes to picking stocks is something called return on invested capital. So return on invested capital is basically the amount of returns that a company can get if it reinvests its earnings. So for example, let's say if the company has a 20% ROIC, meaning to say if the company invests an additional $100 into the company, it will be able to get back $120. So that's a 20% ROIC. So for all of my companies, I want to try and aim for an ROIC of more than 20%. So 20% is normally the threshold, meaning to say that the company can still reinvest its earnings to get even more earnings and even more earnings. So when you mix ROIC with high reinvestment rate, that is typically the best match, and it is the one made in heaven. So for example, Google over here, Google has high capex. Yes, Google has projected around a $75 billion capex in this year, 2025, and they did about $55 billion in capex in the last year as well. But look at Google's ROIC. It is currently now at a 32% ROIC, meaning to say for the $100 or for the $55 billion that they are reinvesting, they're getting about 30% of that back through its earnings. That is incredible. That is incredible reinvestment rate, meaning to say they're reinvesting a lot of their earnings, but they're also getting a lot of their earnings back as well. So normally when you're looking for companies, you want companies with high ROIC as well as maybe high growing operating margins. So when the operating margin is growing, that means that they have pricing power and they can continually increase prices above inflation. That is typically what type of companies you want to look for. So there is one last thing that I normally look at. It's more of like a gut thing. So what I want from my companies is something called pricing power. So pricing power, the term, stands for companies that can increase prices above the rate of inflation without the demand for their prices, without the demand for their goods slowing down. So take for example, let's say you have Netflix. So if tomorrow Netflix increase the prices of their subscription by maybe 10%, will you cancel your Netflix subscription? I'm sure 90% of people won't be able to. Similar to your YouTube TV, it increased, I think it doubled their prices, and yet the subscription level was still relatively high for that one. So that is incredible pricing power that I want to have from all my different companies. And normally companies that operate in a monopoly, they have incredible pricing power. So you have your ASML, for example, you have FICO, the credit rating business, you have your Visa, MasterCard, they have incredible pricing power as well. They buy over other companies to increase prices even more. That is just incredible. And you have other companies like, for example, Meta and Google, they have pricing power as well, because there's no other place that people can advertise their ads on.